The Dark Heresy beta is here and we are seeing massive visual improvements, we are seeing voice acting, and we are seeing a refinement of the system. However, it is not just a straight upgrade. Whilst things do appear to be more straightforward and streamlined, it's also a little bit harder to make things viable, and there is a lot more build traps than there was ever in Rogue Trader. Whereas Rogue Trader, everything you build can be viable. Dark Heresy, you can definitely play wrong, and it makes itself very known. For context, I am Revan619, I am a Rogue Trader build crafter and one of the Owlcat partners, so whilst I am doing this review, it should be noted that I do get a little bit of early access and interact with the devs. However, I do greatly argue with them about the balancing of the game. In fact, a few times I have made some things in early testing balancing feedback clear, and they have told me that I was just straight up wrong. However, now that the beta is access to the general public, they're all saying the same things. So let's jump into it, talk about a little bit of it, and then we can build more on that opening. Currently in the beta, we have access to Warrior, Officer, Operative, Soldier, and Mystic. These all have their own unique playstyles, and many mechanics have changed. Armor is now a second HP bar, much like Divinity Original Sin 2, where it'll protect you from taking critical damage and vitals damage, which is an increased damage source directly to wounds. As the archetypes have changed, currently in the beta, melee is very lackluster. Charge and endure cannot be used on the same turn, so if you charge in and you are low on HP, that means that you can no longer be defensive and upfront. It means you have to choose between being defensive and aggressive. Many of the abilities and some of the specializations are very lackluster. Heavy armor, for instance, will give you more armor, which is their second health bar, but all enemies in the game have las weapons, so trash mobs will often out damage what you can heal. Some warriors won't be able to heal at say 10 to 20 armor, whereas the trash mobs on hard will actually do 45 damage each, and when there's swarms of 10 of them each doing 45 damage to your armor, you will get melted incredibly fast. So you might think that you might want to go medium armor specialist. Defense is an armor class basically in this game. By stacking that, you can avoid enemy fire, but even at 60 to 70, enemies can often still hit you. There's always a chance that they will melt you, because there seems to be a cap. Where it is specifically, we don't know. However, warriors are fairly low damage unless you're building for a very specific build like a warrior Santic build, so you feel very squishy, your damage feels low, and you go down incredibly quickly with not much to recover, so you need a lot of support from your allies. Warrior is no longer a solo tank build, it is more just like a melee DPS build that has a mild bit of tanking, even for the heavy companions like the Ogryn. Officer is just as broken as ever. It can add a lot of morale, which is the new heroic system, and it can even debuff enemies, as well as being able to do a lot of things like give extra turns and boost stats. It is a very effective linchpin for your party. Operative has thankfully seen some really huge buffs, where it can now be played as either melee using knives, which ignore armor and go straight for vital points damage, or you can use snipers, so when you have allies clear your enemy's armor, you can safely do incredibly high damage from a distance. It currently drastically outshines the damage that both warrior and soldier can do, making it a very valuable member of the team. The only issue is it is entirely single target and it lacks a lot of attack economy. Soldier has had a massive downgrade. In this version of the game, the rapid fire ability is practically worthless. Whilst you can double your distance of your area attacks, area damage is non-existent. The only thing that you can effectively kill is trash mobs of area weapons, and if you go for burst fire using bullet storm, it's actually been changed to a single target ability that even with the highest possible ballistic skill, you will still miss a majority of your shots. If you could land every single one of your shot, you would do incredibly high damage, but because that is incredibly unlikely, you are just a worse operative, which makes Soldier not very good. The last one is Mystic. Mystic has some unique talents that come to it for Psychers, and it can learn a variety of Psyker schools. If you pick the origins that for Sanctioned Psyker, you can pick a different archetype like Soldier, Operative, Officer, or Warrior, but you can only have one Psyker school. By being the Mystic, you can open up a variety of schools, but you will tend to be in light armor, quite a bit squishier, and you'll mostly be focusing on ranged powers. Currently in the beta, we have access to Astra Militarum Origin, the Imperial Noble Origin, Sanctioned Psyker, and Criminal. Astra Militarum, Imperial Noble, and Criminal all have sub-archetypes, and they have a lot of flavor to it. They will be able to trade certain skills to be used from certain stats. Currently, they are all quite decent, but Sanctioned Psyker definitely here has some of the best flavor, But if you go for it as an origin with, say, like I've done here with an operative archetype, I won't be able to learn other schools other than whichever first one I pick. In the beta, there's currently Pyromancy, Telekinesis, and Santic. Pyromancy is incredibly high damage and battlefield AoE clear. It's actually the most reliable AoE in the game. Telekinesis has access to the only stun in the game, which can trivialize even hard content, so the developers are planning to nerf it. And Santic has a lot of AoE defensive buffs, as well as high melee damage that you can add to your attacks, making it very effective for a frontline fighter. Astra Militarum will focus on buffing companions and then using many support specializations, as well as being fairly good for damage. Imperial Noble is one of the best ones for Officer, and you have a lot of sub-school flavor with it, and I will leave that for you to explore. And Criminal is a mixture of Operative and Assassin, making it very useful to go for it. With the way stats have been reworked, you aren't as multi-attribute dependent as you think you might be, because you can say focus on just Perception and level a few things from Perception based on your Homeworlds, and instead of going for Intelligence, or you can do it the other way around. This gives you more options to build. However, you will notice there is currently no archetype that really supports sword and gunplay. The best way to do it would be Warrior, but then you're just sort of mixing one attack and then an offhand attack, and the dual weapon specialization heavily focuses either dual melee or dual range. It is not recommended and not really supported to mix the range and the melee options, because you'll just have really low attack. Of the Homeworlds, we have a Fellowship agility based one with Hive World, which has some abilities for being around allies or being on your own. We have Death World, which is the toughness perception one, which has some abilities to increase morale when you avoid taking critical effects. And then Forge World, which is the intelligence and toughness one, where you can gain morale for having high armor, and if you have low armor, you get extra mobility. Very good for a nimble character, or for one that you want to be a little bit tanky. Skills have been reworked a little bit. Now each weapon has their own hit chance, which will then add up the appropriate weapon skill or ballistic skill to determine if you land your shots or your melee attacks. Area attacks just automatically hit unless they have a specialization to be able to use their defenses, which is their armor class, to dodge it. So it's a little bit easier to use a variety of different things, though like I said, you will still be quite pressed to try and hybridize ballistic skill and weapon skill. Intelligence and Perception both add scaling to vital point damage, so any knives or sniper builds will like one or the other. Willpower has a lot more skills attached to it now, with Metal and Interrogation, and it's mostly still going to be used around Psycho Powers, though it has a little bit of Officer. Officer will mainly focus on Fellowship, but Agility is going to be good for all classes as well as Toughness, whereas Strength is going to be purely for your melee frontliners. With the rework, a lot of weapons have some very good roll support now, so they feel very effective, such as melters for clearing armor, shotguns for clearing health, or bolt weapons for clearing health, though it is pretty hard to switch between them. One weird decision they have made is to put armor penetration and anti-armor on las weapons, which means every trash mob has a 4-burst fire on armor melting, which is really weird because las guns are meant to be low armor pen, so you find that your trash mobs just obliterate any of your warriors, making them really impotent when it comes to trying to be a frontline tap. So armor gets shredded by trash mobs due to las weapons having this extra damage. It makes warriors feel very bad to play. Due to this, heavy armor is basically not good for survivability of warriors, so you're mostly going to be wanting to go for medium armor and defense stacking to avoid damage, because that's more reliable, but not perfect. You will still need cover. However, Cog is limited to heavy armor and can't use cover, so he just gets melted in the first turn regardless. He's not very good as it currently is. Soldier Burst Fire has been changed to be a single target attack, which stops it being OP. However, it would be nice if it would target random enemies within your line of sight if you kill the first one, but currently it just makes you be a worse operative. Their area damage is incredibly low. While Smelters are good at armor stripping, they have no killing power, which means mid-tier enemies, which you often get swarmed in the encounters, you have no reliable way to take them out as a soldier, and soldier can only really singly target burst down 1, so you often get overwhelmed, making soldiers very useless to the party overall. Only Mystic Pyromancy has reliable ranged area damage, and only Telekinesis has reliable crowd control with the only stun in the game. However, the developers didn't like that I was using stuns to trivialize a lot of the encounters, so they changed some of the beta to give some boss immunities to stun, and they're planning to nerf it further. However, they have not provided other options on the hard mode to be able to counteract other things. Now, I've only tested this on the hard mode, so if you've had different experiences with the game playing on easy difficulties, do understand that it's because I have only approached it from hard. The current balance design for combat seems to be just giving enemy incredibly high morale again, which means that by the second or third turn they can start one-shotting your party, and on harder difficulties they lower your morale gain, which makes a lot of talents worthless, because if you have a talent that gives you +1 morale, it instead won't give you any at all, and talents give you +2 instead give you +1. You also lose -4 morale when you get hit. This means it is very hard to manage your morale, and it is very often that a single mistake just gets you snowballed. There is no way to recover once you start losing the encounter, and if you have a single companion go down, it is incredibly unlikely that you're going to win the encounter unless you start heavily cheesing. It is not fun and is not balanced as it currently is. Some encounters have been incredibly overtuned, that whenever you go to the second area, enemies have a massive HP increase, a massive damage increase, and will gain 5 to 7 morale a turn, and one boss mechanic gives the entire map of trash mobs +10 morale, which will cause them to just one-shot your whole party with no counterplay. I found that the only reliable way to beat, say, the Valkyrie fight, if you've done any looking up on this, if you go there second around level 8, is to just spam fire grenades and use Sarah's Blaze Weaver to instantly clear the battlefield and to just keep stacking extra turns. It is not a fun strategy, and I found no other reliable counterplay other than RNG brute forcing, which is not what I would call good balancing. Operatives, whilst being quite underwhelming solo, they are actually incredibly OP if you give them officer support and telekinesis assail support. They will be your highest damage dealers and the primary targets of giving extra turns. If you use Lothar with a operative that can use melee or even a warrior, dual weapon combat using knives, they will just shred the enemy battlefield, taking out multiple enemies a turn, and it is currently the best way to engage combat is using the assail upgrade with knives. It is an incredibly potent playstyle. The companions you get between the two locations are a bit skewed. One area will have 2 officers, the other area will have your 2 practical warriors. This means your early routes are limited based on what start you pick, and there is no way to know until you get there. This needs to be readdressed, I think, in the full release to better distribute companions across the 2 areas. Currently, whatever second area you go to is incredibly overtuned, and enemies gain too much morale with you taking too much morale loss, and they just have too much health for you to be able to reliably clear swarm encounters. Hopefully this is something the developers look into for their hard mode and for their unfair, but currently I do not think just sending out infinite waves of trash mob that have incredibly high morale that every second turn can one-shot you, that requires you to play keep away psycho spam, is not a fun way to balance your game. We do not want to go back to that Pathfinder meta where it was just buff stacking incredibly high stats to try and kill the enemy of rocket tag before they can kill you. Currently dual weapon specialization is noted, but it does not represent the iconic Warhammer 40k playstyle, and I hope that the developers will add an archetype that does support hybrid attacker of sword and gun. It is the main thing of Warhammer 40k, and they have been getting hounded with this feedback since alpha, but they have yet to respond and to react to that. Despite some balancing issues on the higher difficulties, the game is incredibly enjoyable. The aesthetics are very good, the music is very good, the voice acting is very good, the looks are very good, and I think they are on a very good start with the investigation system and the story and for the roleplay that we are seeing here. I think this will shape up to be one of Owlcat's best CRPGs, but if they want their long-term fans to enjoy it, they just need to spend a little bit more time balancing the higher difficulties. Now, I would recommend the full game to just about anyone who likes CRPGs when it comes around, but the big question is, should you buy into the beta before the full game releases? And I'm really going to say vote with your wallet on here. If you have the extra money and you want to support them and you want to feedback the devs, definitely do it, and hopefully with enough voices they will address some of these balancing issues, because there is a lot of people complaining about whichever way you go second isn't currently tuned very well for, say, daring and hard, and let alone when we get an unfair difficulty. I don't think the best way to balance an encounter is to just send infinite trash mobs at you and have really bad morale gain that doesn't represent what the talents do. If you nerf talents, you need to have it reflected in game so players can see that before they pick a talent they find out is dead, because the difficulty they are playing on makes the talent redundant. I personally did actually buy my own copy despite getting a free code, and I ended up giving a free code to a friend. I do highly recommend it, like I said, if you want to support them. But if you're still on the fence and you're willing to wait, then go ahead and wait. But I do think they are on a fantastic path, and I'm looking forward to see a little bit more. I still think they need to rework plasmas as well, because I didn't talk about it very much, but currently plasma weapons and shotguns do not feel very good. Shotguns don't have much stopping power, they don't have any knockback. Plasmas are very, well, redundant. They are single shot, they have an area capability, but they're just not well implemented. There's no archetype that will actually benefit using a plasma rifle, and I think that it could use a little bit of work. As for knives and swords and sniper rifles, all the precision weapons are very fantastic, and there is some really good upgrades. Axes feel a little bit weird, and Omnissiah axes were quite bugged, but many of the new companions that we're seeing are absolutely fantastic. I won't spoil anything about the companions in this, but of all of them, Lothar has actually become my favourite, even though I am an Aldari hater. Hamar needs a lot of work, but it's mostly because the soldier archetype's a bit bad. Cog could use some work, his star and stats are really poor, so he struggles to land any hits. And the biologist, her gimmick is a bit I like the idea, but if she's fighting medium and elite enemies, she struggles and dies very quickly. She's been designed to be a warrior that is a trash clearer, which is a bit odd when you need her to be able to survive against higher tier enemies as your front liner. But overall, I would say it's a fun experience. I look forward to seeing more what they have in the future, and I've started putting together some builds for pre-release for some of my members. If you want to have access to my early access notes, then do join my Inquisitor Tier membership. However, once the full game is released, I will be releasing builds as I have done with Rogue Trader, and I am now currently preparing and waiting for Rogue Trader DLC 3, which has been scheduled for June 11th. I've been Revan619, that's all I have time for today, and I would love to hear right down below your feedback on the beta, and I can help put that to the developers. Till next time, bye for now.